Hi, my name is Ben Atkinson and welcome to the Functional Health Podcast. I interview some of the leading voices in nutrition and lifestyle medicine, and I will share with you their stories, their expertise and their advice, shedding light on the industry from each of their perspectives to help improve your health from today. This week, I'm delighted to share with you my conversation with Professor Robert Thomas. Rob is a consultant oncologist and professor of sports and biological medicine and is returning to the show to talk about his new book, How to Live, the groundbreaking lifestyle guide to keep you healthy, fit and free of illness, which is published by Short Books. So, without further ado, Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ben. It's always a pleasure.
So we're talking about your recent book, How to Live. Very exciting, reaching a #1 bestseller in 4 categories on Amazon. What was your inspiration behind writing How to Live?
I think everyone's got a book in them at one stage. I hope this is mine and maybe more to come. But the underlying reason was I've been writing medical papers for over 20 years now on the research we conduct in our lifestyle unit. Most of those go to doctors. But really, I'm interested in trying to influence behaviour in the patients I see on a daily basis and the general public. I'm not totally convinced that the research papers are actually reaching out to that population. So more recently, we've tried to work with charities, looking at their patient information materials and writing in more lay journals such as Cycling Weekly and nutritionist magazines, etc. But of course, the best way to influence the public is to write a book, because they're still, very well read. People like reading books. And you've got the time and the space to really say what you want to say. So it's quite a nice experience for me to be able to expand the research we've done and the research we've read about as part of background for our trials. So, hopefully if it's popular, it will influence people to change or influence their lifestyle for the better. And that's certainly the motivation behind it. And you can write it in a more lay way so it's more convincing and understanding, I hope.
How is the book different from other diet and lifestyle books?
Well, you're right. There's a lot of self-help books out there, and I've read quite a few of them. A good comparison would be the book How Not to Die, which I suppose is a similar type of category, written by a doctor, which looks at certain lifestyle factors, particularly food, which reduces your risk of a fatal illness. But what I'm trying to achieve in this book is how to live, how to not only reduce the risk of getting life-threatening diseases, but how to improve your feeling of well-being on a daily basis. So how to reduce your levels of fatigue, how to sleep better, how to avoid being on medications which have side effects. And these medications might be, say, for blood pressure, raised cholesterol, arthritis, all of which cause symptoms in themselves and affect how a person lives on a daily basis. So I think that the sort of emphasis is different. The other thing is, I'm an NHS doctor, so I see, 30 or 40 patients a day. I listen to their problems and I listen to what they can and can't do and their realistic ability to change, barriers to lifestyle. So hopefully it's real. It's not trying to set up or advise a lifestyle which is unachievable. I suppose I'm different to other doctors and oncologists because I'm also a professor of sports and nutrition in a local university. Therefore, we actually do design the studies which many people quote in their books. So you're actually hearing it from the horse's mouth. And when you design a study, you really have to understand the background before getting ethical approval and getting patients to go into it. So you have to see the gaps in the knowledge which already exists. And hopefully those gaps have been filled in partially by our research, and this is portrayed in the book. And the third thing is, from my experience, if people want to go through the hardship of changing their lifestyle, most people want to understand why. They want to know if what they're doing is really correct. And I think I've got it right in this book. So not only that I feel the advice is accurate, but the explanation of why. So we want to look at what the biological pathways in the body and how lifestyle affects those pathways, and then how those pathways then influence disease, which makes it a little bit heavy in places. But when people get it, they're so much more likely to say, well, I'm going to, eat more nuts, or I'm going to reduce sugar, rather than just someone just telling them to do that.
Absolutely, and you've included a lot of detail in each chapter, and there's a lot of information in there. Why have you structured the book in such a way?
Well, the book is basically 4 parts. So it's got an introduction explaining who the book targets and why there is a need to try and reduce the risk of chronic disease, because it's now it's going to affect all of us. 90% of diseases, 90% of deaths, are going to be caused by the common degenerative disease, and this book targets the lifestyle changes which would reduce the risk of those. Then it has sections on how the body works. As I've just said, my view is, and I've heard this from many patients, is they're more likely to change if they understand, in a sort of nutshell, without going into too much detail, understand how the biological changes in the body, the genes they're born with, how those are influenced by lifestyle, and how then those biological changes which have had those influences go on to cause disease. So it's a little bit heavy, the first section, but I think I've persuaded people to go, to persevere with that, because I regard it as like characters of a novel. It's describing the processes which will be referred to later on in the book. And I think that makes it different as well, because it's actually important to understand what happens when you eat the wrong foods or do the wrong things or even do the right things. So the structure then goes on to mainly diet, so what foods to avoid, and then what foods to embrace, which I'm sure we can talk about more in a minute. And then there's a section more about lifestyle in general. So, why is exercise good? What pathways exercise helps? When to exercise? How much to exercise? What foods you need to eat when you're exercising? What foods you need to avoid when you're exercising? And then how to avoid environmental toxins, inflammatory toxins or carcinogenic toxins, which might be in the household or in the environment. And then at the end, it goes through some quite specific diseases, such as how to reduce your blood pressure if it's excess, how to help weight control, how to reduce cholesterol, all of which will reduce the need for going on to medications for those conditions.
Excellent. And having read the book, you summarise the chapters at the end, which really cemented it in my mind. So it made it much easier to follow and kind of assimilate the information, rather than following a huge plan, which is very detailed and it's just overwhelming. You can kind of take it step by step by step, which I thought was very interesting and a kind of a different approach to a lot of other books too.
Yeah, so this is not a novel which you can read from start to finish, although many people have, and we've had fantastic feedback to say they couldn't put it down and all these things, which are lovely. But it is also aimed to dip in and out of. So if you're someone who recently diagnosed with a borderline high blood pressure or something, you can go straight to the blood pressure chapter. And not everyone wants to sort of read. I mean, it's quite a big book. It's 462 pages. And, some people might not have that time to read the whole chapter. So that summary at the end, if you just want the instructions and you believe that those instructions are correct, you can just read the instructions if you want. For example, have more celery, have more beetroot, reduce the salt, etc. But if you're someone who wants a bit more background explanation of why these foods work, for example, just sticking to that chapter, why does celery reduce blood pressure? Well, it's because of the nitrates, and they cause dilation in the vessels. They reduce oxidative stress, improve gut health, all those things. You might be someone who's interested in that. But if you just want to know what to do, you just go to the summary at each chapter.
Yeah, that was a really interesting approach. And something which came up, I think it was under Dietary Toxins, when you talk about hydrocyclic amines and these compounds which are created when you cook foods, which was quite frightening at first, but then you explain there's a lot of ways to avoid them. different preparation methods and how to cook them, etc. So that was really empowering to me, not knowing that information before and being able to change that and protect my health for the future.
Yes, I think you have to be realistic when you live your life. We can't, there's an expression, life, you don't live longer, it just feels longer. And if you like barbecues and you like meat, you're not going to be interested. But when I speak to patients, I serve on a daily basis, they are willing to change, but they may only want to do one or two little changes, and hopefully the book will emphasize which changes are the most important. For example, you've mentioned barbecues. Well, yes, if you go and get a cheap sausage, fry it to a crisp on a barbecue, and you wash that down with some white bread and maybe a sweet drink full of sugar, you're doing everything wrong basically. And most people don't even like that food. If you say, look, why don't you get some higher quality meat, marinate it for an hour in herbs and spices, and the polyphenols in those spices will counterbalance the carcinogens produced in the meat when you cook it. Have it with some salad, which provides roughage and vitamins and minerals and other things called polyphenols, which are anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer. And then instead of having a sugary drink, have a glass of red wine, or even a drink without sugar in it. So I'm not saying that you can make the barbecue worse. In fact, I'm suggesting it actually would be better and more tastier, and it would be much, much healthier. So it's not about going off and having quinoa and rocket salad 3 times a day. Is about the foods we all enjoy, making them tastier, smell nicer, look nicer, and actually be healthier.
And top it off with a bit of red wine at the end. I don't think people would need much convincing about that. So you're primarily a cancer doctor. Why have you included other conditions in the book?
Well, as you know, I'm also a professor of sports and nutritional medicine in the local university, so I'm involved in studies in those fields. And I very much believe that the two specialties could merge. I think what we learn from athletes and people interested in exercise and nutrition in general should be more integrated into oncology, because a lot of cancers are, have a lifestyle element. We think probably in the region of about 50% of them could be avoided if you had a perfect lifestyle. But not only that, how you choose to live your life can influence how you cope with the cancer treatments, the rate of progression of the cancer, and the risk of relapse. So I think the two specialties should be one. Why I've included other diseases as well as cancer, that's mainly because they go hand in hand. If you reduce the risk of cancer, you probably reduce the risk of arthritis, dementia, diabetes, stroke, and all other things. So it's actually similar advice. But on a day-to-day basis, a lot of the treatments we use in oncology now have moved into the biological setting. In fact, more than half the treatments I and other oncologists use are things like monoclonal antibodies and tyrosine kinase inhibitors, so in other words, non-chemotherapy options. And they have a very strange profile of toxicity and risks, and things like blood pressure being raised, arthritis, fatigue, pneumonitis, lung disease, and even diabetes are now the side effects we're dealing with. And these are the same degenerative conditions which I refer to in the book, which affect the general population. So on a day-to-day basis, we're having to look at strategies to reduce the risk of getting those degenerative diseases, and in my view, hopefully avoid going on to medications for them, because then that leads to a whole cascade of other problems once you've started down that route. So yeah, it's because I have an academic interest, but also I've got a daily need to try and help the patients who are now getting these conditions.
Who do you see the book benefiting the most?
I think it's got multiple readers, which hopefully will get a benefit. So the book mainly targets people who might have been recently diagnosed with either cancer or high blood pressure, high cholesterol. It might be bought for someone with those conditions, so a good Christmas present, for example. Or it could be people wanting to improve their sports performance. You like yourself, you're going out to do a marathon in a few weeks' time. So what can I do to eat to help with muscle recovery and joint health? Or just someone who wants to avoid the chronic diseases which are almost inevitably affecting humans as they get older. And of course, the earlier you start with these interventions, the better. Prevention is better than cure, as they say.
You just mentioned me running a marathon. So I just ran it on the 4th of October, did the virtual London Marathon, and I finished reading the exercise section of your book the day after. And surprisingly, unbeknownst to me, I did very little training for that marathon, and apparently jumping into a high intensity or a high amount of exercise without training and leading up to it is not very good for you. So it was like you were telling me off after doing the event. But that is something which I'll take on board and make sure I implement next time to make sure I train for these things. I wouldn't recommend anyone train for a marathon with 2 weeks notice, but I like the challenge, but maybe this is not serving me in the long term.
So the section on exercise tries to look at what level of exercise is the best for your health, how to prepare for exercise, particularly with nutrition, and what if you fortunately age is on your side, Benjamin, you're 27 and you actually look quite fit. But it is a problem if people are suddenly get an illness and they want to go out and they haven't prepared properly, they haven't had proper advice from personal trainers. I know people who've gone out and fallen, physically fallen over. They've lost their balance because they haven't done enough strength exercises beforehand. People who don't eat enough what we call polyphenols in their diet, which comes from herbs, colourful vegetables, foods which are generally healthy, because you need those to enhance the antioxidant enzymes. Because when you actually exercise too much, you produce free radicals which could actually damage your DNA. So you do need to have your antioxidant system adapted to cope with that. So not everything is obviously beneficial. And to go out and exhaust yourself is probably harmful, and as you know, because you haven't been able to walk since. But the same applies with cancer. If you really exert too much, you can actually, it could be mildly carcinogenic at first, but of course, once you've adapted and you've done the right thing, it's fantastically beneficial overall. So I don't want to pretend exercise is anything but overall highly beneficial to everyone. Yeah,
it's just these idiots who decide to do long distance running without any training.
Well, you don't do it that often, and you are young, but as you get older, paradoxically, many people under 30 do exercise quite a lot in the UK. But as you get towards 70, probably only 10% of the British population exercises to a level which they should do, in our opinion, which is in the region of about 3 hours a week of moderate intensity. And that's the group which gets most benefit actually from exercise. They're more likely to keep their cells young, reduce the risk of dementia, arthritis, reduce their cancer risk. And it's not easy. The reason why it's harder is they're more fatigued. They might have joint problems, but there are ways, and we explain in the book, to try to sort of graduate it, do some perhaps balance and strength exercise before you go for a run, and you can gradually, bit by bit, slowly increase your levels, and then you will reap the benefits.
So I really enjoyed reading about the chapter on healthy fats. Was there any other chapters in particular which you enjoyed writing about?
Well, actually, now you mentioned the fatty chapter, I enjoyed that probably one of the most, mainly because there's so many myths out there which you read about in health magazines. People brand saturated fats as harmful and unsaturated fats as beneficial. But, that's not actually true when you look at the data. Saturated fats in meat tend to be harmful. and saturated fats are present in many plants, such as coconut, and they're beneficial. In fact, fats are a very good slow-release energy source, is what we should be eating, rather than processed carbohydrates and sugar, which have this yo-yoing effect on the metabolism. But fats in meat, if you have too many, the way you cook meat, they can be converted into carcinogens, for example, should be avoided. The other thing is to mention, fats are generally very calorific. So if you're struggling weight, of course, it's about reducing all the fat intake. The other myth, of course, is between omega-3 and omega-6, and I've heard it countless times saying that omega-6 is pro-inflammatory and omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. But again, that's not true. We need lots of omega-6. It's the primary fat within the brain, and people say, oh, you should reduce your omega-6 content. No, it's more the other way around. You should increase your omega-3 intake rather than reduce your omega-6 to get the right balance. So it's fascinating. They were previously regarded as the over many years, even in government sort of propaganda, they were regarded as the enemy. But actually, I embrace them. I think they're probably one of the healthiest things we should increase intake of.
There are so many chapters in the book and so many topics. Which one did you learn more about whilst you were writing it?
Yes, I mean, the book took 3 years to write, and I did learn an awful lot. I suppose the ones which stands out is chapter on phytochemicals and polyphenols. And as I've already mentioned, these are the natural chemicals within food which give its colour, its taste, and its smell. And I already knew they were beneficial. We've conducted randomized trials of supplements containing them and shown significant benefits in prostate cancer, for example. And we have a current trial using those foods to try and protect against COVID. So I've already started at a relatively high level of knowledge. But the more I looked into it, the more papers I read and the more I speak to people, the more fascinated we are. And we hear a lot in other books and in the media about vitamins and minerals and fibre. We hear very little, certainly up until the last few years, very little about phytochemicals and polyphenols. I mean, they are amazing what they do to your body. They have over 180 biochemical changes happen when you eat these foods. They reduce excess inflammation. They improve oxidative stress, so you don't get DNA damage, which ultimately leads to premature aging and many of the chronic diseases. They improve gut health, so that improves gut integrity, so you're not leaking toxins into your bloodstream. And actually, the more you look into it, even things like type 1 diabetes, which is thought to be just, we don't really know what it is. There's more evidence coming through now that, that it could be related to a poor gut health because the body is trying to constantly fight these toxins, and it's triggering an immune reaction, which not only tries to hit the toxin, but there's collateral damage, so it's hitting your other organs. And that's why we know that diets rich in polyphenols and phytochemicals have a lower risk of all sorts of things, arthritis, diabetes, dementia, improving mood. And every day I was learning something new on this. I mean, I think they're incredible chemicals, and they're all around us. We just need to tap into them.
When you say they're all around us and there's such a variety, is there any ones which you would emphasize over others? Meaning, is there any ones which are much more powerful or health promoting than other ones?
Yes, I mean, this is an enormous subject. I mean, you could write a book, 1,000 pages long just on polyphenols.
Yes.
They're not all healthy. I mean, some of these plant chemicals can be actually poisonous. So yes,
of course.
You have to be a little bit careful, and you can. Just because, say, for example, turmeric is healthy, how much should we take? Should we take it all through the day? What type of turmeric? From the evidence I've read, you get a benefit up to a certain amount. So it doesn't look like taking too much of one individual polyphenol, you're going to get more benefit. So it's all about diversifying the diet. So you get polyphenols within different foods, such as pomegranate, tea, broccoli, turmeric, sage, some of which have estrogenic effects. So you have to be very careful you don't overdose on those, particularly in a supplement form. And there's synergy between foods as well. So we know, for example, tea and pomegranate is quite a nice combination. They seem to enhance each other's beneficial effects. So taking, a lot of pomegranate or a lot of turmeric doesn't seem to add to the benefits, but combining different foods will. And also, when you combine foods, you have lower levels of each individual polyphenol, so you're less likely to get a toxic effect from one. Then we could go into this in enormous details, but as I said in your previous podcast, I like to split them up into sort of estrogenic and non-estrogenic, ones which help inflammation, whilst ones which might have a anti-inflammatory effect. So diversifying the diet is really important. That's why, it's a bit of a worry that our food sources, where we get our food from, is getting less and less as we have industrial farming over the years. We only actually apparently get all our food from 10 food sources now, as 100 years ago it used to be hundreds.
Yeah.
So, try to be more adventurous in your diet and try to look for different sources of food and try to spice it up and make it more colourful and taste nicer.
I find it fascinating just how culinary doses of certain foods, like you said, are beneficial but also have this almost synergistic effect on health. When if you have too much of one, maybe in a supplement form, obviously this is not all the case because supplements are just a huge spectrum, but it can actually have a net negative effect on your health.
Yeah, a lot of patients ask me about supplements, and I'm interested in finding out the truth as well. But a common mistake is to put supplements into one basket. I mean, there are thousands of different types of supplements, so and some are beneficial and some aren't. As a general rule, if you take a chemical out of a food and put it into a supplement, it's no longer food, it's a chemical. And those are the ones you should try to avoid. Classic vitamin A and vitamin E, lots of studies have been done on those. And actually, unless you happen to be deficient in those, which most of us aren't in the West, they cause more harm. They can increase risk of cancer. They can reduce the adaptive response to exercise. So actually, it will make exercise performance less. It will increase the risk of arthritis, etc. So I would not advise those vitamins. But you can get whole foods, such as the Polyphenols trial, where we got whole foods concentrated in a pill and saw a benefit. There's a lot of interest with probiotics at the moment in a way to enhance your probiotic bacteria, particularly if you combine it with a prebiotic, which encourages the growth of those bacteria. And we've known for a long time that those foods containing probiotic bacteria are healthy, such as kefir, kimchi, certain cheeses, etc., which I strongly encourage. But we also know that there's ongoing studies suggesting, previous and ongoing studies suggesting that certain probiotic supplements can add to our health benefits, improve gut integrity, etc. And more relevant to the recent COVID outbreak, there are 3 ongoing studies, including our own, which are looking at probiotics to as a way to try and reduce excess inflammation in the body, which is one of the problems with COVID. You get this excess inflammatory response. I could go on and on and on. The safe supplements seem to be vitamin D. You'd have to take really high doses to cause toxicity, and I would certainly advise that during the winter in the northern hemispheres. Vitamin C is relatively safe unless you have intravenous or very, very high doses. There's a question with omega fats. Yeah, we all tend to be deficient in omega-3 and 6 because we don't eat enough fish and seaweed, etc. But there's a big debate about whether you get the same benefit when you put it in a supplement. And when you delve into it, which I've done in the book, a lot of the problems aren't actually the omega-3s. It's because they've added vitamin E as an antioxidant to stop it oxidizing. So, when you push back on it's mainly 2 large papers from California which showed that the omega-3 supplements might cause cancer. When you pushed back at those authors and say, well, did those supplements actually have vitamin E? And the answer was yes. So you have to read between the lines of these papers. So, and there's a lot we still don't know. So, I'm not saying the book answers everything. Sometimes it just asks another question, but it hopefully gets you thinking about things and tries to give you sound advice based on the available knowledge up to now.
Well, it certainly gets you thinking about things in a very different way. One of the key elements which seems to be apparent or seems to come up quite frequently in the book is that obesity seems to underline or increase the progression of nearly every condition mentioned. Now, I'm not saying there's one answer to the nationwide obesity problem or indeed global obesity problem in Western societies. I know it's multifactorial, but from your opinion, what's a good starting point?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people struggle with the weight in Western societies, and as you just mentioned, it can cause a whole host of problems. Also, it's not just about the weight; it's actually about the muscle to fat ratio. The worst thing you can be is a thing called sarcopenia, where you're overweight but you have quite thin muscles. The first step, I would say, is to try to increase your muscle mass, which won't actually make you lose weight. In fact, you might even put on a bit of weight. So resistant exercise is very important because that will improve your well-being even if you still are overweight a bit. And it's not just a simple case of exercising more and eating less, which some people say in their books, because if I give a man Zoladex or a drug to reduce his testosterone, he will instantly put on weight, and he will look you straight in the eyes. I have not eaten any more food. I'm doing the same exercise. So it is true that, some people struggle with weight over others, and you can either be genetic or what sex you are. But there are other factors which are really interesting. For example, gut health. We know that if you have a poor gut health, your body is in a state of stress. And in a state of stress through evolution, it wants to preserve calories. So the normal cycle of excreting cholesterol in your lower gut is reversed. So your body tries to absorb as much fat as it can because, a million years ago, that would save your life if you then didn't have food for a few months. So, improving gut health can help you lose weight. We know that, our good friends, the polyphenols, can help you lose weight. It reduces inflammation in your body, and the body can then get de-stressed and not try to store every single bit of calorie we absorb. And also it's the education around food, the chapter on sugar, which I really enjoyed writing, which, there's 100 sins of processed sugar, but one of them is it significantly increases weight gain. It's probably the biggest factor over fats, in my opinion, because you constantly have this cycle of feeling hungry and then satisfying yourself with sugar. The sugar feeds then the bad gut bacteria, which creates stress. It creates insulin overload and all sorts of horrible problems. So if you want my three tips, it would be to increase resistance training, increase exercise, particularly on an empty stomach, such as first thing in the morning or maybe before a late lunch, to reduce processed sugar and to improve your gut health.
Now, in the book, you talk about from salads to olive oil sun cream. Have you managed to follow everything in this book to the letter?
Absolutely not. This book is a guide of what we should do, as in a utopian society. We are not going to achieve this in every person, but at least we know, what to do to balance it. So if I've gone out and had too much sun on my body or drank a little bit too much red wine at the weekend, I want to pay my body back for the rest of the week. I like writing the chapter on skin health because I like cycling, I like windsurfing, going out in the sun. So I've probably had too much sun. So I want to know what I can do to reduce the risk. And these are underestimated. We know that a glass of red wine after sunbathing all day will improve DNA repair and mitigate some of the damage to the DNA. We know that olive oil is a very good. It has polyphenols within olive oil, which help with reduced oxidation in your skin and improve DNA repair. And there's been plenty of experiments to show that. So therefore, a good after sun would be an olive oil based cream, which they exist, or just put olive oil on your skin before you go into the shower. Also, the risk of concomitant carcinogens while you're sunbathing is very much underestimated. So if you're going out and eating a burnt sausage in a barbecue while frying at the same time, or smoking,
frying meaning frying in the sun,
absolutely frying the sausage and your skin, but also smoking at the same time, it's called a two-hit theory. Your body's often able to cope with one attack, but it may not be able to cope with two, but it certainly can't cope with three. So it's trying to say to people, you can't avoid damage to your body, but what can you do to pay it back? What would be the balance? And it's all about balance, isn't it?
Absolutely. Having read the book myself, I can definitely say that it's worth a read and support the whole lifestyle medicine message. So, Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for coming on again. You've already given us 3 tips plus plenty more, and I'm sure many listeners can get them from your book.
Well, thank you, Ben. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you enjoy it. And if there's any feedback or any topics which people feel should be included for the next edition, I'm willing to learn from that.
I'm sure there will be, and I do hope that we can speak again soon. Thank you for listening to the Functional Health Podcast. You can find links to everything that we talked about today in the show notes. If you have a second, please consider leaving a 5-star rating on iTunes. It really does make a huge difference and helps get this valuable information out and reach more people. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date and know whenever I release a new episode. You can connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, or our website, and all questions are welcome. As always, thanks to Joss Aurelia for the editing and Alan Harper for his support.